What's going on, guys? Welcome back to United View. Hope everyone is doing very well. The press conference has just taken place. Erik ten Hag has spoken to the assembled media at Carrington ahead of tomorrow's Premier League clash against Nottingham Forest at Old Trafford. A Saturday 3 p.m. kickoff, a rarity for Manchester United, really. And it was an interesting one, this press conference. Sometimes you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it can be quite dry. Sometimes the news isn't really there. Sometimes there's not too much to talk about or anything like that. What a start, by the way. That's got to be like a record. That's got to be a record in terms of going live and dropping out. I mean, within the first 30 seconds. Virgin Media, you are a disgrace. You're a cheat. I mean, that was nuts. That was crazy. I don't know. that was concerning. Literally start, disappear, go back. And what's really weird, I think it's like a streaming software thing, because I'll click go live, and then like usually if you drop frames during the show, there's a thing and it says drop frames, and that number just, evolves as it goes on. But this one, it's like it will say nothing's happened, and it definitely did, because I wasn't live for a period. Nevertheless, okay. As I mentioned, it was an interesting one because a lot's happened on and off the pitch in the last 7 days. Injuries, obviously the Mason Greenwood situation, the loss against Spurs, discussion about the midfield, etc., etc. So the point being is, there's a lot to talk about, and there are a lot of questions. It was very fast-paced, a lot of Erik ten Hag giving short answers. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into what ten Hag said, the questions put to him, and his responses. So let's get straight into it. The first question was, unsurprisingly, was about Mason Greenwood, the investigation, the conclusion, the decision. The question was put to Erik ten Hag. Obviously, Manchester United have been under the microscope the last week with the investigation into Mason Greenwood. What were your thoughts on the process and the outcome? Erik ten Hag said, quote, "Look, we are not where we want to be with our team. I have a lot of work and a lot of focus on my team, so I focus on the players who are available. I only have statements about our performance, our squad, where we have to improve, because it's clear we have to improve. I have to put every effort into getting the team to perform." The then question was, for the follow-up to him about that, was, did you think he would be available? And he just reiterated his point. He said, "I'm only here to give statements on the squad. I want to improve. I have to put in every effort to make this team perform." It's not surprising that certainly he's going to say that. What's he going to say? It had been reported at the same time that the reports had come out that maybe that Man United were looking to reintegrate Mason Greenwood into the squad. It had been reported at the time that that Erik ten Hag, or certainly the footballing side of things, they were keen on having him back. But Mason Greenwood's not coming back. Mason Greenwood is going to leave Manchester United. They're actively looking at a solution to facilitate his exit from the club. The investigation's been concluded. The statements, as bizarre as they were, have been put out there. Ultimately, again, my opinion was it was the right decision. Some may think it's a different one. That's your prerogative. But what's he going to say, honestly? What's he going to say in a press conference when it comes to that? So it's not surprising what he said. The process is done. It's over. It's time really for everyone, I think, to move on with everything now that it's done, certainly. The next question that was put to him was about more of the injury side of things that's happened in the last 7 days. Mason Mount going down through injury. Luke Shaw going down through injury. Obviously, it looks like Luke Shaw could be out for not weeks, maybe months. Mason Mount out for about 4 to 6 weeks. Other injuries that we've got in the squad, whether it be Kobbie Mainoo, Tom Heaton. Of course, we know the one about Rasmus Hojlund as well. We'll talk about him in just a bit. So the question was, considering the injuries and everything else that's been going on, has it been a challenging week for you? And ten Hag said, that's the situation. It's normal, top football. You go to the limits, injuries coming up, always disappointing, but you have to deal with it and construct a squad and deal with it. So he wasn't sort of playing woe is me or anything like that. He was saying, look, it's part and parcel of football. I'm sure deep down he is very frustrated. I'm sure deep down he, like everyone else, is looking around going, what on earth is going on? I'm sure he's probably having those discussions, honestly, with the medical department. I know that I would. The medical department at Man United did a good job last season, actually. Historically, our medical department's been a crock of shit, really. But last season, with the sheer volume of games that we played, we were fairly well managed to effectively manage that load, and we kept people relatively fit. The injuries that we had, apart from maybe towards the end of the season, but the injuries that we did have were largely sort of contact injuries of bad tackles and things of that nature. People like Donny, people like Eriksson. The Varane one, he kind of broke down, but that kind of happens with Varane. The Lisandro Martinez one was a bit of a fluke. He got his foot caught in the ground, and he did his metatarsal doing that. But largely, United did fairly well last season when it came to injuries, really. And now this time around, it's staggering, isn't it? I think that there'll be absolutely looks into what, from a medical point of view, are we doing? Is this something that we're doing wrong? I think there'll be discussions about what the preseason looked like and how that affected things, because I think this close to the start of the season and this close to preseason ending, you would have those talks about, did we play too many games? Or in the US, were we on artificial pitches? Did that play a part in it as well? Some people had speculated that just by the sheer volume of players that had done ACLs or cruciate injuries at the beginning of the season, did that have an effect on a lot of the teams were playing in the US on these kind of pitches throughout the preseason tour? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a medical expert when it comes to anything like that. So I think it'll be something to look into. And I'm sure, again, as he mentions, it's incredibly frustrating and disappointing. As of right now, they can't do anything about it, but they can proactively plan for the future. And he's not going to go into a press conference and say, the sky's falling, the sky's on fire, we're screwed, we don't have any players, my medical team don't know what they're doing, this, that, and the other. Erik ten Hag can play it very, very, very cool in front of the media. We've seen him do that a million times as Manchester United manager. So I didn't expect any differences coming here in this press conference either. But as he mentioned, it's disappointing, and I'm sure certainly he's asking questions because you would have to. Why wouldn't you? Even if it was one, you'd ask, did we not manage this properly? Is this something that we're doing? It could just be bad luck. But when it's this reoccurring, and again, a couple of them were contact injuries. Kobbie Mainoo was one, that's a bit of a fluke. But you're looking at hamstring injuries, muscle injuries. Sometimes that can imply that something else is not being adhered to. So I think that certainly is something to look into for Erik ten Hag there, and the Manchester United medical team certainly. What are some people saying in the chat at the moment here? Director Me says, perfect answer on injuries. If he complains, the media still won't be happy. And that's, again, I do agree with you there, because, and this is sometimes, I think, sometimes as fans, people can get annoyed by sort of the non-answers that managers give, or sitting on the fence on certain things. But realistically, they have to. If Erik ten Hag came out in the press conference and started, first of all, bashing his own medical department, that doesn't do anyone any favours. If he also came out and started bemoaning and whinging about, games, or the amount of games that the people have to play, or the amount of games we played last season, or whatever, people would say, well, we have to do it, and you don't hear us complaining. So that's the answer you have to give. That's the answer you have to give. You go, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it at the moment. I think he looked frustrated by the Greenwood questions, in all honesty, because maybe he can't say what he wants to say, or he's been told, just, you've got to say this from a legal point of view. And to be honest, I'm sure he's just frustrated by just that, again, that whole situation. Again, it's over. It's done. Move on. Let's go into a different direction. Let's just, again, I can't put it any more simply, can you? Just move on. It's done. It's over. No point, dwelling on it or anything like that. It's done. And I'm sure he's not happy with the start to the season. Of course, a loss and a poor performance as well in the victory against Wolves. He spoke about the midfield in a bit, which we'll touch on, and he seemed pretty prickly about that. Probably because he knows it's the truth, honestly. So he did seem somewhat of a frustrated figure at times. Big up Rich in the chat says, I think Erik ten Hag came across as pretty annoyed / frustrated himself, to be honest. Orca says Ten Hag is as much to blame as anyone. So there you go. Court says, oh, and you're going to Carnival this weekend. No. I have a busy weekend, actually. I have a very busy weekend. There's a wrestling event on. There's obviously the game tomorrow. this evening, depending on what happens. I think I'm going to be doing like a SmackDown watch along on my channel, because I think it's going to be a Bray Wyatt tribute show. I don't know. So if that is the case, I'll be doing a watch along and a reaction to that, so people can kind of all come together and, you know, share their stories and do their sort of condolences together. So it's going to be a busy weekend, certainly. So no, I'm not going to Carnival. No, I'm not. And I didn't get the invite as well. Flex, I didn't get the invite from Flex or Josh or anyone like that. So indeed, I'm not going there. Now, the next question to Erik ten Hag was, throughout the process and this investigation process or anything like that, had you spoken to Mason Greenwood? And Erik ten Hag said, look, my focus is on the squad and who is available. And that kind of put a button, I think, on the whole Greenwood chat and questions, because it became very obvious very quickly Erik ten Hag wasn't going to answer any questions. He was going to give the same answer over and over again. And sometimes, look, this is where you get into the balance of the media. They've got to ask the question, but they also know what the response is going to be. After people asking variations of the same question 3 times, and Ten Hag giving an answer, the same answer pretty much 3 times, you move on. So that's indeed what they did. They said, well then, speaking of players available, is Rasmus Hojlund available? Because there had been these conflicting reports, hadn't there, of Hojlund's going to be on the bench against Forest tomorrow at Old Trafford. It had always been reported since he signed, really, that the game that they had kind of earmarked to be his debut, or he was going to play a part in, was going to be Arsenal at the Emirates. And indeed, Ten Hag basically kind of confirmed that was the case. He's not going to be involved tomorrow. I mean, you never know. He could spring a surprise. He might be on the bench, but most likely he's not going to be involved tomorrow. But he didn't go as far to say he's definitely not going to be involved against Arsenal or anything like that. He basically kind of hinted at, I think that's the time that Hojlund's going to play. So he was asked, is Hojlund available? He said, not for tomorrow. But then the question was, well, how near is he? And Ten Hag said, quote, not for tomorrow. He's near. Today, for the first time, he came into team training. So next week, we expect him to do a full week of team training. So he's near to the squad. So looking at how Ten Hag kind of does these things, like last year with these players that would be injured and then they would take time out, or they would train on their own for a bit, or they'd have their own recovery program, or you would see footage, wouldn't you, of the first team squad or the match day squad almost doing training, and then you would see sort of other people that were recovering from injury or on the periphery or anything like that in a separate group for however many weeks, really. I think, 3 weeks now, something like that. Rasmus Hojlund's been doing his own rehabilitation recovery program. He's been on the grass, certainly, but he's not been with the first team squad. He's not been training with the group. He says that for the first time today, he's come into that training group and he's actually participated in first team training with everyone else, which is positive news. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible for him to be on the bench tomorrow. I think it's very unlikely, and I think it's more likely that he would be involved against Arsenal, particularly if Ten Hag's kind of intimating that if he does a full week, he'll be involved because he'll be ready by that point. And it's not as if this whole time he's been miles and miles off as well. They said it's quite a... United's line the whole time was it's a minor thing. It's not a big thing. It's just a small sort of issue. It'll take a few weeks of recovery, but he'll be back. I think the real interesting question when it comes to Rasmus Hojlund is, were those reports, and they weren't really reports, they were more doctors or medical experts speculating about his ability to play multiple games a week. They were suggesting that because of the nature of his injury, he might only be able to play 1 game a week for the foreseeable future. We don't know if that's the case. I think that's really the key. I think that's really the key question involved in all of that. But Hojlund's not going to be available for tomorrow, but most likely he is going to be available against Arsenal. I mean, it's just, the more I just think about the Rasmus Hojlund situation, I already feel bad for him, realistically, because the weight and expectation that's on him. I mean, this was a forward that when we were first linked to him, people forget this, when we were first linked to him earlier on this summer, he was meant to be the young backup striker that we were getting in addition to a Harry Kane or a Victor Osimhen or an established striker. And Hojlund was this young guy. He would coming in and out of the squad, but he wasn't going to be the bona fide starting striker. He was going to be the one that was going to come in. We were going to develop. We were going to turn into a quality player. There's a lot of potential there. We're paying for potential. And now we have a situation where we bought him and he was injured and we didn't know. We found out during the medical and we went, oh, what do we do? And they went, well, it's not too bad. Okay, we'll bring him in. He's going to take a few weeks, but he'll be fine. You bring him in, and then because of the start that we've had, because of our inability to score goals, we've only scored 1 goal this season, Rafael Varane, despite creating, what is it, the second most chances in the league or something like that, or the second highest XG, I forget which metric it is, but we're up there in terms of chance creation. There is this, I don't know if it's an expectation or just a hope. Man, I hope he's good. man, I hope he's better than we think he is. And again, it's pure hopium, because you look at his numbers in Atalanta, and there's nothing to say like he's going to come in and be bona fide bagsman. I mean, he might, and I hope so. I really do. But the expectations already are so, like, not high, but it's just, again, it's hope. And, you know, if it doesn't settle initially, you've seen what this fan base can be like. We can be ruthless, undeservedly so sometimes. And Paul Merson-Settons, I worry for him, Jeff. I do. But he's not going to be ready for tomorrow. I hope, as I mentioned, that Anthony Martial starts tomorrow. He won't play full 90, but start Martial, have him play 45 minutes, get Marcus Rashford on the left. Anthony's going to play on the right-hand side. And I'm actually surprised. More questions will come out later on, because it's just the first part of the press conference. The embargoed part will come out at 10:30 later on. I'm surprised in this first part, nobody asked an Anthony question. I'd be stunned if by the end of tonight, quotes don't come out about an Anthony question involved in that, or a Facundo Palestri question or anything like that, because I was very surprised to see that and hear that. But sometimes, honestly, and this is what's kind of wild about these press conference reactions, is the sort of first part sometimes doesn't actually have the best information. The first part doesn't have the best quotes. Sometimes the first part can be really dry, and then around 10:30 tonight, once the other quotes come out from the embargoed part of it, people are on X and they're going, oh, I can't believe he said that. Whoa, that's unbelievable. That's really, really surprising. Wow, that's a bit of a hint. So sometimes it's a case of the embargoed part can be better than the first part. But yes, when it comes to Rasmus Hojlund, not available for tomorrow, most likely going to be available for Arsenal. I suppose the question is, and this is a question to you guys, and I'll put a poll in the chat. If Rasmus Hojlund has a full week of training, so he's trained with the team today, and then he has a full week of first team training, are you comfortable with him starting against Arsenal at the Emirates, or do you think he should be on the bench? I'll put that poll in the chat. I've got to find a way of actually phrasing that properly. Should Hojlund start against Arsenal? Poll is in the chat, and I mean, and the thing is as well with it is, it's not like, if it was at home, if it was at Old Trafford, I would say, you know what, take a risk, do it, you know, why not, 45 minutes, but away, and given, I mean, never played in the Premier League as well before. If you're smart, if you're an Arsenal player, and I know this is kind of like old school and it's not in the spirit of the game, but if this was 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, the first thing you'd do when the kid, 20, away from home, at the Emirates, the first thing you'd do, you go right through him. You would go, welcome to the Premier League, mate. That's what you do. So I don't know if I would. I think it would be a risk. But look, if he's ready, if he's good enough, then why not? Some people would say, right? But after a week of training, and he's been out of action for a minute. It's not as if like, oh, it's because there was a lot going on in pre-season, so he didn't play, but he's ready, he's fit, he's available. It's like, well, he's coming back from an injury as well. And given we've got Anthony Martial, who is not going to be fit all season, we're just waiting for him to be injured again. Let's face it. We can't afford to risk Rasmus Hojlund again, honestly. So I would say no. I would hope probably the wisest and most effective thing to do, one would think, would be start Martial against Forest so he gets some minutes in, whether it's 45, whether it's 60, take him off, fingers crossed he's not injured, start him at the Emirates as well, again, 60 minutes, something like that, Rashford out on the left both times, and then you bring Hojlund on for 30 or something like that, or you bring Hojlund on for 40 minutes, something like that. That would be the wisest thing to do, I think. Because Yeah, throwing him in. I mean, that is fully at the deep end. I mean, it's only a little bit deeper if it was away at the Etihad, really, if you compare it to last season, or maybe Anfield actually. But it's right there, isn't it? Really. So I probably wouldn't do that, but you never know with Ten Hag. Depends, I suppose, what happens this week too. What's the poll saying? It's only been in there a couple of minutes, so we'll let it continue to play out. But the question was, should Hojlund start against Arsenal, assuming that he would have had a full week of training now that he's back, or he's actually participated in first team training for the first time today. So far, 48% of you say yes, 52% say no. So it's pretty close actually. It's closer than I thought. Again, I would lean into no and think, right, you've got Martial who is available, utilize him for however long he's going to be around. Build up his minutes tomorrow because Hojlund isn't going to be available. Start Martial against Arsenal and then bring Hojlund on. And then next thing you know, you've got two strikers, right? Suddenly you've got two. That's not a bad thing. So I think that might be the right option. What we got here? All Elite says Martial scored one coming off the bench, obviously referring to his debut against Liverpool with the Martin Tyler scream. Austin Baker says Hojlund getting that start and a hat-trick. Oh, I mean, the hopium there is very strong, isn't it? Very, very, very strong. Got Air says, we need to sell all the Anthonys. Follow Alanga out the door. Not happy with, was it Martial? The Anthony as well as a different spelling. Always gets me, the Anthony spelling. But there you go. Where am I when it comes to the question? So yes, that's the latest when it comes to Rasmus Hojlund. Not available for tomorrow, but most likely will be available against Arsenal. I still wouldn't rule out, though. Because he trained today, and depending on how well he trained, if Hojlund was on the bench, I do think that's very unlikely, but I can't say I'd be totally stunned by it. I wouldn't be shocked if he threw a bit of a curveball, but I think given the finances, given the injury, which they're sort of saying is sort of, a hot spot on his back that could lead to a stress fracture if they don't manage it properly, that would seem particularly reckless of Erik ten Hag to do that. So I don't think so. But at the end of the day, again, I wouldn't be totally shocked. We got nearly 500 people watching, guys. Less than 100 likes. So if you haven't already, click the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Remember, you can join the UV Members Club as well. Links in the video description. You get your badges, your emojis, and your exclusive members-only content. I'm sure as well that you'll be, you can put all of the emojis in the chat at the moment if you are members. And members, as I mentioned, can also call in tomorrow for the full-time view after the game. Have your say on whatever result it may be too. And remember, you can also subscribe to United View clips. That's also the pinned comment in the live chat as well. Some of the best moments across the 2 and a bit years that United View has been in existence. Let's move on. And he was asked about injuries. Yes, injuries, that's been one of the biggest stories over the last 7 days for United, certainly in the last 24 hours regarding Luke Shaw's injury. So he was asked, is there any more detail on Mason Mount and Luke Shaw, their injuries, their timelines for recovery, etc. Ten Hag said, well, we can't do that, put a timescale. It's personal these days, and also tell you exactly what the injuries are. Erik ten Hag and Manchester United have basically got to a point where they very, very, very rarely say actually what the injury is nowadays. I mean, unless you actually see it happen on the pitch, and you can kind of assume what it is based on that. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes they will come out and report it. For instance, with Martinez at the end of the season, they confirmed that it was a metatarsal thing. I'm trying to think for what other players they've come out and confirmed. Sometimes they go very generic and go knee injury. And you go, what knee injury? It's a knee problem. So, yes, they don't really say that much. So he says it's personal these days. They will be, for some period, absent, where Luke will be longer than Mason. Luke will be longer than Mason, I think. He said Luke will be longer, Mason, I think, quicker. And that's most likely because I think it had been reported that Mason Mount's injury was a hamstring injury, that he was going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. They said he's definitely going to miss, obviously, tomorrow, definitely going to miss Arsenal. And the hope was that he would be back after the international break. But if the timeline, the reported timeline is accurate, you would still say after that international break, because we're looking at sort of a week, 2 weeks, the international break, I believe, is only 1 week. I don't think it's 2, so that would be 3 weeks. You would still say, actually, that game back against Brighton, it'd be close whether he'd be available for that anyway. It might be after that, so it's still going to be a while. Luke Shaw, Samuel Lucas is reporting this afternoon that actually the injury is worse than first thought when it's come to him. Of course, David Ornstein did report last night that the hope was, regarding Luke Shaw's muscular injury, that it was going to be weeks rather than months. Samuel Lucas is reporting that it's most likely going to be months. It's worse than first thought. So it might mean that Luke Shaw's out for, I don't know, a couple of months. He might be back now. I mean, it's basically September at this point. It's the end of August. So it might be a situation that he's back come late October, November, maybe. Again, we don't know exact numbers on it. If that is the case, and the follow-up to this was about Terrell Malacia, which we'll get into in just a second, there is talk about United possibly entering the market for another option at left-back, but Ten Hag also said in the press conference that's kind of unlikely. He said he was really happy with his squad, and he feels that his squad can deal with it, which I don't really know how. How can you deal with not having both your recognised left-backs available? We'll deal with it by putting a right-back at left-back. And you know what? It actually frustrated me. It annoyed me when I saw the report earlier on, because of the situation. United are going to have to go after an emergency left back. They're going to go for it to make sure they have cover for the position. And I went, wait a minute. So you're going into the market because the two players aren't available. So there is money there. And you've got a midfield that clearly needs reinforcements, clearly needs cover, clearly needs people in there. And it's like, well, FFP. It just goes to show FFP is just a crock of shit. It's bullshit. Like, you've got all of these other clubs in the Premier League clearly sort of, rolling their eyes at it or just putting two fingers up to it going, it's not real. It's not. And I know Maynard got fined earlier on this year regarding FFP, and people can complain about, Chelsea are doing this and Chelsea are doing that. I don't think they care. No, I don't think they particularly care. So I don't know what's more concerning, really, about that is, one, that maybe Ten Hag thinks, we can figure it out, we'll deal with it at left back, or right, we'll go get a left back. Why are you not buying players anyway? Why are we not going for midfielders? Why are we not looking at the market for another striker, even if it's a loan or something like that? Same with the midfielders too. Why are we not doing that? Why are we not doing anything apart from feeling sorry for ourselves and going FFP and these players won't leave? Why did you not think about that? Why did you not anticipate that these players are on big contracts, so what's it going to take for them to leave? If I say to Harry Maguire or Scott McTominay or Donny van der Beek, hey, we're looking to let you go this summer, and they say, well, I've got a contract, we go, we know your contract wherever you go isn't going to be as much as what you're on right now, so what kind of number are you looking for? What kind of compensation number are you looking for? And if Harry Maguire comes back and goes 12 million, we go, no thank you. We go,
it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Figure something else out. Or you get on the phone to Gareth Southgate and say, tell this guy you're not going to play him in the international squad because I know you're not. The problem is with the Harry Maguire thing, by the way, with the talking about Gareth, he's risking his international spot. I don't think he is. I was shocked, and you go back and look at it. I was shocked when the news had come out that maybe Southgate had talked to him and said, hey, if you play for United or you stay at United and you don't play, well, it's going to be difficult for me to pick you for the Euros. I don't believe that conversation really happened. I really don't. Because Gareth said Harry Maguire cannot play. If he doesn't play for the entire season, he will still be in that Euro squad. In the international fixtures that happen up until the European Championships, Harry Maguire will play. Gareth Southgate has proved that at that point. There is no threat on Harry Maguire's international career. People can say he's running a risk. Maybe times will change because maybe, Colwell, Chelsea or whoever will come along, but Harry Maguire will be involved in that squad. There is no threat there. The precedent has been set last year with that whole, you weren't really playing, but the World Cup was in December. No, it's not. I mean, you've got Gareth Southgate doing interviews saying he's Man United's best defender. And Maguire's got nothing to prove, fingers in the ears. He is going to play for England. If there was a legitimate threat that Harry Maguire would not make the Euro squads, then I think this entire process would be significantly different. Significantly. I think maybe that whole negotiation over the compensation, that might be a little bit different. But it's not. Clearly. And I wouldn't even be shocked, and again, I don't know if this is me speculating here, I wouldn't even be shocked if during this whole process of, the move to West Ham, it collapsed, all that kind of stuff, I wouldn't even be shocked if there was a conversation of, don't worry about Harry, I'm still picking you anyway. Because he knows. He is. Don't even get me started on Gareth Southgate and England and all that kind of stuff. I look at some of the players England have got at the moment, and I think unbelievable, phenomenal. And it worries me that Gareth Southgate is in charge of them, because how many times do we have to, for England fans, and I know not everyone in the chat is an England fan or an England supporter, but how many times do we have to see a golden generation wasted by shitty managers? It's just, every time. I mean, it's ridiculous. Life is very cyclical, isn't it? So yes, when it comes to timelines for Mason Mount and Luke Shaw is going to be longer. Mason Mount's going to be a bit shorter. Regarding that left back situation then, with Luke Shaw not being available seemingly for several months now, what about Terrell Malacia? He didn't participate in pre-season. He has a knee injury by all accounts, which was a hangover from last season. So the question was put to Ten Hag, well, what about Malacia? What's an update on him? And Ten Hag said it will also be a few weeks before he will be back. Definitely, we have solutions in our squad to cope with that at left back. We thought before the season about this scenario. It could happen, you hope to avoid, but if it happens, you have to be ready for it. So, one, he's saying Malacia is going to be a few weeks. Again, what does a few weeks mean? We don't know. Anthony Martial last season was out for a few weeks on several different occasions. We didn't see the guy for like 2 months. Sirens are going because it's absolutely criminal. I mean, so when he says Malacia is going to be a few weeks, who knows, realistically, whenever he's going to be back. It certainly, just like last week or whatever, felt like it was quite a ways away. As far as do we have the solutions in the squad to fix this issue or resolve this issue, well, we know what those solutions are. The solutions are play Diogo Dalot at left back, which is most likely going to happen tomorrow, or you take a bit of a risk and you play Alvaro Fernandez, and that's your options realistically. And it's one of those ones, isn't it? It's not the case of we don't have options, because we do. Eric Ten Hag isn't in a situation where he's like, I have literally nobody to play at left back, because he does. He does have people to play at left back. He does have Dalot. He does have Fernandez. They can play at left back. It's about the quality of the players playing in that position. Diogo Dalot has done it before, and he's done it effectively. He scored against Nottingham Forest playing at left back last year. So it can be done. But it's patchwork, isn't it? It's patchwork. It's not someone whose strongest and most regular position is left back. The other option is someone whose strongest and best position is at left back, but he's barely, if ever, played any games for the Manchester United first team in a competitive game in the Premier League. So it's a case of, do you go with patchwork? Do you go with a risk, or do you try and find emergency cover? And I think that's kind of the situation that Ten Hag's in at the moment. But as far as are there solutions in the squad, he was very actually confident when he says it. I mean, the quote doesn't really do it justice, because when the question was put to him, are there solutions in the squad? It's, definitely. Definitely. Well, my concern and worry would be, what happens with Wan-Bissaka if he gets injured? What happens then? Or frankly, what happens just if Wan-Bissaka's not playing well? We've seen this actually in recent weeks, haven't we? Wan-Bissaka not playing too well, Dalot comes on, vice versa. So let's not just assume that the person who's playing right back is going to be having a really strong game. What happens if we're going through the game and it's like, I tell you what, he's having a stinker? What do we do then? We switch Dalot over and put Fernandez at left back? The point being is we're one incident away from kind of disaster, really. And or we end up playing like Lindelof at left back or right back, which again, that's kind of what I suppose Erik Ten Hag is saying is, of course there are solutions. Yes, there are solutions in the Man United squad. There are people that can do a job. There are people that can play in those positions if need be. Are they the best solutions though? No. And I kind of understand what he's saying, whereby we anticipated this in pre-season, but we took a risk. They knew coming into the season, they said, we know Terrell Malacia is injured, and we know that Terrell Malacia is injured for a while, which means it's Luke Shaw. We've got a left back, we've got Luke Shaw, and we've just got to hope Luke Shaw doesn't get injured or suspended or anything like that for however long that Terrell Malacia is going to be out. Well, you know what happens? Luke Shaw gets injured, so he's out. So now I got no left back. So they took a risk and it didn't pay off, which again, I think pretty much sums up Manchester United in this transfer window so far. Taking a risk, it's not paid off, realistically. So, yes, we have solutions. Most likely the solution is going to be Diogo Dalot at left back. I would be interested to know, and once again, this will probably come out in the embargoed part of the press conference, which again is always the best It's always the best part for me. They ask the best questions in that, which would be, where are you leaning? Are you going towards Dalot or Alvaro Fernandez? Does he have a chance? Is Alvaro Fernandez going to be in the first team squad tomorrow? Is there a chance he could play? Is he at the level that you're prepared to put him in to that kind of position? And I think I mentioned this morning. At home against Forest, you can get away with it. I think you can get away with, at home against Forest, you can get away with playing Alvaro Fernandez left back, probably. If Forest will play 5 at the back, they'll play low block, and we'll still have a lot of the ball. At the Emirates, absolutely no way. No chance. Don't do it. You have to play Diogo Dalot at left back at the Emirates, away from home against Arsenal. You'd get destroyed, realistically. I mean, you've got Bukayo Saka. Would you genuinely be willing to put Alvaro Fernandez up against Bukayo Saka, who legitimately might be one of, if not the best right wingers in the world at the moment? He is that good. He is frightening to watch. And he's only 21. And this is what I talk about Southgate, about not being able to manage players that are world class. Bukayo Saka is well on his road to becoming world class if he's not already at that point. You just wouldn't. It terrifies me to think about, really, putting Fernandez up against Saka in that kind of a game. So you put Dalot in there. But and then maybe it comes into a situation of Ten Hag going, look, I want to bed in that back four then. I want to bed in that back four before we play against Arsenal at the Emirates. So I'm going to put Dalot in there. 1, because we have to win. And 2, we need to get used to that back four playing across. Because, yeah, I mean, I really just thought about that now, actually. Alvaro Fernandez against Bukayo Saka. Oh, my God. Good luck, kid. No way. No chance. Absolutely not. Because actually, last year at Old Trafford, it was quite a good battle between Malacia and Bukayo Saka, if I recall correctly. Because at that time, Malacia was still ahead of Luke Shaw. So, yeah, I think that pretty much just confirms, really, that Dalot's going to play, certainly. But Ten Hag says that he believes there's solutions in the squad for that. Santiago with a super chat says, heard rumours the pitches in America have a lot to do with these injuries that toured there. Thoughts? Also, we desperately need a third striker over a left back. Well, that was something I mentioned earlier on. Some people were saying that. I saw Cam on social media was talking about that, and a lot of these teams did tour the US, and a lot of these places in the US have these sort of artificial pitches, and sometimes they can be particularly bad for your knees, your ankles. There might be something in it. There might not be. Some might just look at it and say it's just the culmination of these footballers over a long period of time, over 2-3 years, playing so much football. So much load on the body, on the joints. As you mentioned, on sometimes not so great pitches, but it's maybe more the volume. And some people might point at this and say, look, all of these people going down with knee injuries and stuff like that, it might be about that. Some argue that, no, that's really more sort of muscular injuries. If you're playing too much or there's too much load or stress or anything like that. Again, I'm not a medical expert, but there might be something in it, certainly. There might be something in all that kind of stuff too. And we also need a third striker over left back. Well, I've been saying I want to get another striker in all summer, but I think at this rate, I'm just happy if we get a player in. And when I say a player in, I don't mean Johnny Evans, and I don't mean emergency left back. We want to get in. Realistically, we spoke about this morning. The options that I think United have is Sal, Dean Henderson. They want about 20 million. Whether they get it or not, I don't know. Sal, Donny van der Beek, maybe about 15, something like that. And that's money. You've got money there. Possibly McTominay. And if West Ham come back in with 30, I said before, reject it. At this stage, considering what we need and the start that we've had, I think you accept it. I think West Ham's negotiating leverage has just skyrocketed with Man United's start to the season and with the injuries. So much so that if West Ham do come back in, United have a real thing to think about. They're like, what do we do? And Tank says in 7 days. I know, I mean, obviously, I don't think that's going to happen because Man United are terrible at selling players. But heaven forbid the sort of footballing recruitment department do their job, right? Heaven forbid they earn their money and sell players and make deals and be creative about incomings as well. Heaven forbid they look at the FFP and go, what can we do? We know we can't go spend 50 million quid on a player, but if we were to get a player, how would we do it? Can we do loans? Can we do this? Can we do that? Because, and this is worth pointing out as well, January, I know it was Weghorst, and I know it's Sabitzer, but they still did it. They still found a way to do those deals despite basically being like, we don't have a budget in January. They still did it. So don't give me, well, it's just too difficult to do. That's what pissed me off with the Harry Maguire thing. It's just we don't think we can get a replacement in time. Oh, come on. Everyone knows you can get replacement in time. Just, nonsense. I can't even find the bullshit button. Oh, there it is.
Bullshit.
Thank you, Carl. So, there you go. Next question was, do you understand why fans want to know your position on Mason Greenwood? And he said, what Manchester United fans want and expect is winning. I'm responsible for that. I have to put every effort into getting the team to perform. And again, once again, it was basically like, I'm not talking about that. The next question, or follow-up to that, was Mason Mount being injured. But even when he was in there was criticisms and thoughts that midfield three, or certainly the midfield partnership with Casemiro and Mount, Bruno involved in that, was getting overrun. It was not balanced. Are you working to address that? And Ten Hag staunchly defended his midfield, his new look midfield. He said, quote, you always have to analyse clinically, and that assessment is not right. It was about the back and the front, not about the midfield. That is why we were open. I said that straight after the game. Now, I'm going to be honest. I mean, Eric was full on like...
Accusations!
These are not accusations. This is
False accusations.
And I don't know if you can smell that from Eric. It might be... I can't... It smells a bit to me like...
Bullshit.
Because, right? Obviously, it's a team effort. Obviously, yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that the front players... Whether they be Rashford or Garnacho or Antony, particularly in the second half, were they doing enough? No, they weren't doing enough. But you cannot come out of that game and be like, nah, it was just the defence and the attackers. It had nothing to do with the midfield. It didn't. That is a manager defending his players. That is a manager not trying to pile on. There is a narrative out there about the midfield being overrun. The problem is the narrative is out there because it's true. It has been overrun. It's not to say that it hasn't worked for short periods. I mean, I don't really think against Wolves it worked at all. But for 30, 35 minutes, or maybe the first half against Spurs, it did work. Because we created chances. For all intents and purposes, half-time, we should have been, what, 1-0 up, 2-0 up, something like that, maybe? So I think from his point of view, they can say he's probably trying to sort of suggest, well, it's not a case of it hasn't worked at all. It has a bit. And it is, I think, easy to say it's just the midfield's fault. It's not the midfield's fault that, the strikers that can't score or the attackers can't score. I mean, Bruno's part of that midfield and he missed a sitter. But it's also, again, it's not totally their fault. The chance creation certainly is there. But to kind of imply it's more on the forwards and the defenders, it's not. It's not totally. That's a manager defending his players. That's Erik ten Hag. Again, we know he lies. We do. And yeah, that's clear to see. It's obvious. And he'll know that. He knows that clearly. But there were other aspects of it. As I mentioned, the attackers did nothing in the second half. I think the defence, well, they did okay. I think you look at someone like Lisandro Martinez has actually struggled a bit, really, in the first couple of games. Of course, he got hooked off at half-time in the first one, whether that's because he was on the booking or Varane said that he had a bit of an injury, but he struggled against Spurs as well. So the whole team in totality is not performing at their optimum. But I mentioned this morning, and I don't think people really like to hear it, but we realistically haven't played well. I haven't myself, maybe this is the better way to phrase it. I can't recall coming out of a game as a Man United fan and going, we've played really well, we were brilliant today, for a while. I can't recall having that feeling for quite some time. My feeling is since about late February, early March, we've been stumbling. We've been stumbling through games. We've been playing in moments. We've got quality players, so we get through games, but we haven't had that real impressive, all-encompassing, again, just that feeling of coming out of it, but like, yeah, we were really, really good today. And look, a lot of teams don't play amazingly for the full 90. I'm not saying we're Man City or anything like that, but that's what I think is going to happen tomorrow. I really do. I think tomorrow we'll win because I'd be stunned if we lost, honestly. And no, that's jinx, Owen, but we haven't lost at home since Brighton on the first day of last season. So I'm not expecting a loss or anything like that. I do think we'll win. But we do just tend to stumble through games, and we don't kill games off. So it allows games to become more open. We allow teams into games. Even at home, we do this, and we kind of get away with it because we're at home. Because we don't take our chances and we're not clinical, teams that maybe don't start particularly well, or when we do start well, we don't take advantage of it. Spurs was a great example last week. As I mentioned, first 30 minutes, we could have been 1-0 up, 2-0 up. By that point, given that it's Spurs without Harry Kane, new manager, stadium would have been apprehensive. We could have completely controlled and dominated that game, but we're not clinical enough. And we stumble through games. And even look at last season, had the season been an extra 5 games, I'm not sure we'd have got top 4, honestly. That's why we were worried, is because we saw Liverpool coming up and we were just sort of petering along, and we just sort of stumbled over the line. And that's how we kind of started this season, is still sort of stumbling through games. So I do think it's bigger than just the midfield. I think it's just bigger than just the midfield. I think there is a team issue, a mentality issue, and just this group of players I'm just not seeing as when we were beaten at Arsenal at home last season, or Liverpool, or even when we played City, that sort of just tenaciousness, that real, like, that's a team in the mold of the manager. We know Erik ten Hag is, relentless, ruthless, aggressive in how he wants his teams to play, hard work, doing the running, doing the sprints, covering the pitch. And that's kind of just not what we've seen for a while. We've seen a team that looks sometimes lethargic and leggy and a bit slow. And I'm looking for that. Do I think we'll get that tomorrow? I don't think so. I think we'll get what we've got, which is a win. But in those big matches, it's difficult for me to articulate. I think people know what I mean. I hope so. But that's my worry. And that was my worry going into the season as well. So, yes, he says that the midfield, the assessment is not right, that the midfield is getting overrun, even though it kind of is. I'm going to close this poll. It's been open for nearly 30 minutes. Should Hojlund start against Arsenal, if indeed he has a full week of training? And it's very, very, very close. 49% of you say yes, 51% say no. Only 1% in it, or 2% in it. Certainly, again, very, very close that. Very interesting. So there you go. Fat Thor says, Owen, drink some water, buddy. You've been doing a lot of shows. Well, I think you should just drink water anyway. Hydration's very important. What, for the voice? Or just again, it's good to be hydrated. You don't get this kind of glow without hydration. Fat Thor, it's just water, remember. That's the skincare routine. Certainly. Speaking of the midfield as well, the fitness of said players was brought up too, with Casemiro being the subject of this question. And the question was, is Casemiro fully fit? And Ten Hag, he scoffed at the idea that Casemiro isn't fit. He said, well, if you see the numbers, you see he's fully fit. I have no doubts they can do it. After 35 minutes against Spurs, he didn't do it anymore, and we were first across the rank of fitness, basically suggesting that there's no fitness issue with Casemiro. If you look at, I think he said in the first game of the season or something like that, we were first across the rank of fitness. Again, I don't know whether I really believe that, honestly. And look, maybe it doesn't translate to actual figures because I don't have the stats in front of me, but just on the eye test, when it gets to like 60 minutes or 65 minutes, they do look leggy and they do look lethargic and they do taper off. And again, if that's just the style of play that you're doing and that's your tactics, is go really hard for the first 30-40 minutes and then control the game, that's fine, but you need to score goals then to do that. You can't not take your chances and it be 0-0 in 70 minutes and you're out on your feet. Or if you know that as the manager, make the subs. That's the thing too with Ten Hag. He's got back into that role. He did it at the beginning of last season. Remember, he used to take ages with the substitutions. 65 minutes, 70 minutes, 75 minutes, sometimes 80. And you're going, wow, like, is he going to bring anyone on? What are you going to do? And then he kind of changed, didn't he? Then he got really quick. He used to do subs at half time or 5 minutes into the second half, and he was proactive because he kind of realised that in the Premier League, managers are really proactive. Things won't be working. You've seen like Pep and Klopp do it all the time. It's not working. 20 minutes, they'll change. 25 minutes, they'll change. So if he knows that players are going to drop off, make those changes earlier. Now, when it comes to Casemiro, I know that Jamie Carragher was doing the analysis on Monday Night Football, saying he's been dribbled past the most out of these sort of key midfielders, and other players have been dribbled past the most. I still do think, when it comes to Casemiro, I do think the criticism on him is harsh, because I think anyone, unless you're like N'Golo Kante in his prime, who just covered an astronomical amount of area on the pitch, I think that anyone would struggle with the lack of support really that he has been having in games. The gaps are so big and the distance is so much to cover that anyone would struggle, let alone someone who is on the other side of 30. So I don't think it's so much a Casemiro thing. I think it's more of a tactical thing, which goes back to the midfield of that balance isn't there. It's not right. And Casemiro needs more support. He needs more people around him that can help him, that can facilitate him. And that's when you get into someone like an Amrabat, or even in situations, again, like you look at, I know we talk about Fred a lot, and when we're talking about Fred recently, people go, oh yeah, but you wanted him out last year. You wanted to get rid of Fred. Well, because, yeah, we wanted to get rid of Fred because you wanted an upgrade on him. There was a reason Fred and Casemiro had played together for Brazil, because the chemistry was there, and they played well together, and they complemented each other, because Fred could get around, Fred could cover area that Casemiro couldn't cover. So you take him out of that, and remember, Ten Hag used Fred a lot last season, and you don't really replace him with a like-minded midfielder. Mason Mount's not the same as Fred, and you don't get that replacement in, you're going to struggle. The balance is off. So again, I don't think it's as much of a Casemiro thing. I think it's more of a system thing, a personnel thing. And I think anyone would get exposed. And I think the focus on Casemiro as, oh, he's washed, he's old, his legs are gone. We've had this discussion. We had this narrative last season when he made his move to the Premier League, and he didn't start particularly well. And he's terrible, he's rubbish. And then by Christmas in January and February, he was one of our best players. To the point that when he missed games, i.e. against Arsenal away at the Emirates, we knew we were going to struggle. We were probably going to lose. They were doing those graphics with and without Casemiro. Remember that as well? So he'll get better. He takes his time to get going, but he needs support as well. And I think that's the key thing too. And finally, the last question was about Eric Bailly. Is there any news on him? There's been talks of Marseille being interested in him. We know that he's available for a free transfer this summer. And Ten Hag said, if we have any news, we will communicate it immediately. But since we don't, cannot say anything about it. Still think Eric Bailly is going to go. He's on like 80 grand a week or something like that. So he'll go. It'd be good to get him off the wage books. But still, it's a concern. I've just seen, and I was waiting for sort of more information on this because it was reported by some outlets, but it wasn't super confirmed or anything like that. But there are rumours this lunchtime that Manchester United might make an inquiry to Ryan Bertrand.
Disgusting!
Fucking reckless! That's fucking reckless! Fuck up!
Now again, not confirmed or anything like that. Ryan Bertrand, I believe, is a free agent, unless I'm mistaken. He's a free agent. I think he's been training with Chelsea. This is a guy that was at Leicester and barely played for like however many years. In fact, Tyrone Marshall from the Manchester Evening News has said Ryan Bertrand hasn't played a competitive game for 612 days and has had knee surgery since then.
You are on crack!
I understand the need for an emergency left back. I get it. I understand. But why you would replace or you'd bring someone in, you've got injuries, yeah? You've got injuries, so you're going to bring in a guy that's been injured for nearly 2 years and has had knee surgery in that amount of time. I mean, at that point, that is when you go to Fernandes. You might as well play. I spoke earlier on, who would you rather have playing against Bukayo Saka at the Emirates, Dalot or Fernandes? And you go, well, obviously Dalot. Who would you rather have playing against Saka at the Emirates in Ryan Bertrand or Fernandes? Fernandes. Any day. Because Fernandes has actually played games. He's played football over the last 2 years. He's played for Preston. He won Young Player of the Year. He's actually played minutes and hasn't had knee surgery. I mean, I don't... I'll tell you now, if we have a window where our last 2 signings are, well, 3 actually, a backup goalkeeper, Johnny Evans, and Ryan Bertrand.
Tell me he didn't just say that.
As of right now, they're just rumours. As of right now, they're just rumours. But, honestly. Well, I'm going to wrap it up there because that's just... I mean, this day's terrible. This day's terrible. I've had enough of it. Anyway, guys, be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. Remember, if you haven't already, go and check out the preview. Flex speaking with Forest Fan TV about the game tomorrow. A reminder, of course, it's match day tomorrow, so there's going to be the match view. There's going to be fan views, full-time views, road trips. All that kind of stuff is on the horizon. And also, Sunday, Match Day Reloaded. Some of our Panenka Studios, it's coming back. Yes, Panenka Studios is coming back on Sunday. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. I'm out of here. Peace.